Thank you. My short comments don't need any title, comments on previous presentations. But not only you, all of you have read or seen all the presentation, but the comments made by the authors have been presented on the blackboard. You have seen them, and I have not. So you have a double advantage on me. I like the general questioning of this Congress, this forum. Forum is better adjusted well. Because after all, these are the problems we are most directly interested in. Can we say anything about our future? And can we transform or have some kind of influence on this future? This is, I'm not saying that all the people who have spoken so intelligently and acutely during the last hour have dealt only with that. But this is the way I'm going to consider, not criticize, but reflect on what they have said. I'll begin with Mr. Asef Bayat. He has a question, can we imagine a Muslim democracy? I immediately answer in a negative way. A Muslim democracy is as impossible as a Christian, Jewish, or Buddhist democracy. God's law is by definition eternal. Man's laws are by definition historical. What a majority has decided, another one can cancel it. The problem is not to know if one religion or another one can give birth to democracy, but what is the basic condition for democracy anywhere in the world? In all religious regions or fields. The reason is well known and almost obvious. Democracy is possible when there is a separation of political power from religious authority. Religious power, be Muslim, Christian, is always a major danger for democracy. So, if you take our local history, our European history, we know quite well that the first beginnings, the first possible conditions for creating democracy have appeared when the German emperor has tried to break his link better. Not only he eliminated some heads around him, but he really created a new national religion that would be extremely dangerous. And what is fantastic in that case is that the British kings have created the least important religion in the world, the least independent and the least dependent. And when people refer to Christianity in the British world, generally refer to people who are much more important, like evangelists. But the Church of England, I remember once going in Finland to the cathedral to receive a doctorate like other people, and we had to go to the church of the Lutheran, the official church of the Lutheran church, but nobody cared. People were discussing daily life problems while going under the rain to the cathedral. So one thing, and I have not pronounced the word because of my nationality, but I must pronounce it, the first condition of democracy is laicity. You call it as you like, but laicity means separation of political power from religious authority. But now, when civil society, not political power, when civil society, economic power, or in ordinary term, ruling class, imposes its interest to entire countries, democracy becomes or is equally impossible. And it is constantly threatened. So the problem is, yes, democracy is possible only when religion is out. But democracy is impossible if its field is entirely occupied by secularization. We need something which is, in a certain sense, certainly not a religion, but which is sacred, which has certain strong value orientation, so that I can say that democracy was really made possible when the concept non-sacred, non-religious, but superhuman of human rights. Not a long series of human rights that Mrs. Roosevelt found in 48 in the General Declaration, but the very fundamental, essential human rights as they have been invented, as we all know. First in England and Holland, then in the United States and France, as far as the Western world is concerned. And this concept of human right, which is gaining strength again, is extremely important, including in its concrete legal consequences. Because it is universal. While there is no universal nation or society, there is no democracy without the recognition of universalistic principles of political legitimacy. Both the new Islamist leaders and the neo-Orientalist Western thinkers must abandon the idea that Orientals are by nature pre- or anti-modern. That is nonsense. It is a downfall of the 19th century Western progressive ideology, which were linked with labor problems in the Western world especially, which have provoked the search for new basic conflict, and that creates a series of new conflicts among religious problems, among religious power, and that doesn't give an answer to the question, is it possible in a religious world to create democracy? But to avoid a misunderstanding, I take the liberty to mention a case I'm personally interested in, which is the case of the southern, that means Iraqi Kurdistan, because I hope you enjoy the motto of the coalition which won last free elections. 3 words to demonstrate that the Kurds were probably unable to find what democracy is. Independence, not too bad. Laicity, simply, and feminism. Feminism. And I must add that the Kurds from Syria, which, as you all know, are quite different and quite closely connected with the Turkish Kurds, but they have accepted this motto for their election. So that at least you have here a process in which you can see the creation of democracy in act. But if it's true that universalistic principles and democracy have been constantly linked together, so that we must consider universalism not European, anywhere, any kind of universalism, including all main religion, but not only them. And real citizenship, the old, I would not say the old Greek image of thing, because I'm not so full of admiration for this system, but what we call citizenship, practically, since the American independence and the French Revolution, these two ideas, which are opposed to each other constantly, but they are closely connected. First conclusion, cultural universalistic orientation and a concept of principle of internal democracy. Democracy being defined not obviously by the rule of the majority, obviously not. Hitler was elected by the rule of the majority. In Poland, for the country I know a little bit, well, the new communist government has been elected legally by a majority. No, the only possible definition of democracy is that these main fundamental human rights are accepted as fundamental principle of legitimacy. They must be considered as more important than values, norms, and laws. The general, we are accustomed to that. There is nothing scandalous in it, saying that what is constitutional is above what is legal. In many countries, especially in the Western world, but it's not the only one. As far as this general problem is concerned, my impression after reading this paper is that Africa, according to Akosua Adomako Ampofo from the University of Ghana, Africa seems to be more advanced than Islamic Middle East Asia, because many African thinkers and leaders today seem to combine consciously, in a voluntaristic way, and in very elaborate and diverse ways, a real respect for universalistic modern concepts with what Mrs. Ampofon names in a wonderful formula, the return to an African future. Reading her text, I must confess that I had the impression to read the first text I had to read in my life, which were Hungarian texts during the People's Spring in 1848. Kossuth, the military chief, Petőfi, the poet, and all these Czechs, Poles, and all these German, Italian, these European of the period of the Spring of the People, 1848, were discussing the same problem. And even before, I would say, the two von Humboldt brothers after Jena in 1807 in Prussia were discussing this problem. So I see a kind of general agreement in all the papers I refer to, a general agreement on the total link, the deep link, strong, between universalistic cultural orientation and a certain concept of citizenship, that is, of transformation of universalistic orientation into institutions and into civil, political, and cultural rights. But the recomposition of supposedly opposed orientation, which is quite convincing for me, but is not enough. Is not enough to propose a correct analysis of our futures. And I think Todd Gitlin is deeply right to add two more dimensions. We are dealing with very basic principles. Two dimensions to this problematic. First of all, a very concrete social dimension of our so-called development has always been the exploitation of human labor by owners of mines, mills, and ships. The fact that this factor has received an unjustified monopoly in some post or para-Marxist analysis cannot justify unacceptable under-evaluations today of social conflicts, and especially of class conflicts in the analysis of our past and our future. Conflictuality is a necessary central dimension of any kind of future. The second dimension that Gitlin is rightly underlining is more original, not more important, more original. It is that the irrational exploitation of natural, environmental, and human resources, which was as dramatic, as he says, in 17th century Scotland, as it is everywhere today, is a major, is a necessary, is a central element of any model of future. There is, we are accustomed to that more or less, but we must be quite conscious that there is no model of future or of future changes which doesn't take into account not what has been built and the condition to build better, but what has been destroyed and will be destroyed and is more and more constantly and dangerously destroyed. As Todd Gitlin rightly says, in the general conclusion of his paper, in a very modest way, we need more encompassing theory. And he aids us sociologists to understand that the four dimensions I just mentioned through the papers I've read, these four dimensions are equally important. They don't have necessarily the same practical importance. Theoretically, they are all of them indispensable elements of a model of future. It does mean a damn thing to imagine a society without conflictuality. It's completely stupid to imagine that we are going to build societies where no destruction, no destruction of the environment, of some parts of humankind, and so on. Now I would like to make one step forward, and I'll ask Markus SCHULZ the permission to ask him to show the way. Because with one of the, I received 5, 6, or 7 papers by Markus SCHULZ, so I'm not sure the one you could refer to, but it happened that I was especially interested in one of them. And the answer that Markus SCHULZ gives to the problem I've just trying to divide is convincing, at least from my point of view, because it is surprising. All the 4 dimensions of a general analysis of the future refer to mass phenomena, long-term trends, so that when we come to the question, what are the most important and efficient answers mankind gives to the major problem, we expect to read kind of United Nations long lists of necessary initiatives, or in the most modest way, the result of intellectual and professional debates. And many of us can be surprised to read that Markus SCHULZ, these enormous mass problem, global problem I've just referred to, drawing our attention not to enormous debate, a kind of German between the 2 world war debates, but calling our attention to a relatively small group of people, Indian, Mayans living in Chiapas, organized as neo-Zapatistas because of the real one, and he refers even more precisely to the sub. Sub means he is not Maya born, Comandante Markus. I cannot conceal my satisfaction as a personal participant of the Intergalactic Convention, which met in La Realidad, and as a member of a research center which has devoted very much time and many publications to this Indian social movement, because as other international observers, among which the Portuguese Nobel Prize Saramago, whom I have seen regularly during these encounters, I can testify, and he testified himself, of the consciousness of these poor peasants who live near the Guatemalan frontier to bring answers to worldwide problems, conscious worldwide problems. In some sense, in the same way, from my point of view, in the same way as the first union members, British, Belgian, German, miners or steel mills workers, were conscious of the importance of the future of the International Association of Workers they were going to belong to. Yes, I believe that in our world, which seems to be dominated by a globalized financial system and by militarized regimes, small and often defeated social movements can bring some very important elements to theories and practices which can transform our future. I think Markus Schulz is right. Because what he said, if I understood him correctly, I hope I did, is that the four basic elements that our colleagues have so clearly put in light are not only objectively necessary for the formation of a future of a type of society and so on, they are the necessary conditions for the transformation of a collective experience into a voluntary, active social movement. So that my main conclusion from what I have read is that let's no longer try to imitate economists or I don't know what, and let's try to see clearly, to convince ourselves clearly that the main condition to build a future and to transform a future is to understand the conditions which are precisely the four you too have mentioned, the four conditions for which people, agents, are transformed into actors, into what, in my own vocabulary, which other people use too, are transformed into subjects, as to use my friend Foucault's word, but he was more limited, I dare say, from the use of this word. And but you see, the problem is that the problem how to act in the future is to be able to transform things into men, agents into actors, categories into subjects, and the subject into defenses and orders of rights, basic fundamental rights. And I want to mention only one word. In the 18th century, which is, let's call it, a moral century, because it invented not only reason, but a certain type of eroticism which were more rationalizing. During this century, the word which was widely used was not only freedom and equality, because it's obvious. I mean, there is no democracy without freedom and equality. But the word which was used was fraternity. In the 19th century, fraternity disappeared. And we all have spoken during more than one century of solidarity. And now we no longer speak of solidarity because there is one word, not my word, a word which is everywhere, the most widely used, is that I found, strangely enough, for example, in two authors who have used them all the time at an enormous quantity. One was Mandela, and the second is Pope Francis. Francis, he speaks of dignity every 4 words. Dignity, because dignity is not social, is not psychological. Dignity is not really moral. Moral is a negative sense for me. It's an ethical notion. Ethical notion, because it's a form of defending or putting in risk, in jeopardy, the fundamental, exactly what when you walk around the mountains in Asia or in South America, what do you hear people saying? They say, we want to be treated as human beings. We want our dignity to be respected. We don't want to be humiliated. The main meaning of a social movement today is to transform people into a movement through which they feel able not to be humiliated. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much. I'm just very humbled by the wealth of those ideas that all come at such crucial time as we face all those horrendous disasters, injustices, but there's so much hope coming out from the grassroots, whether it's from Chiapas, from Tahrir Square, from Zuccotti Park. And we have this new wave in sociology that questions assumptions, that unleashes this new forward-oriented sociological imagination for democratizing futures. But now is the time to continue the conversations at the party. But before we do that, let me just thank very much our gracious hosts at the University of Vienna and its rector, Heinz Engel, for having provided us with this beautiful venue right here in the historical heart of the Austrian capital. Many thanks to the university's very professional staff, Ida Seljeskoog, Franz Pastner, Gary Schneider, Hannah Quinz, and to those amazing, amazing students, student volunteers in their blue t-shirts. Many thanks to all members of the local organizing committee led by Rudolf Richter, to my colleagues on the ISA Executive Committee led by Margaret Abraham, and the members of the Research Coordinating Committee. The members of the Research Coordinating Committee with whom I had the pleasure to work with on the program. Very special thanks, of course, to Isabella Balinska and her staff at the ISA Executive Secretariat, who were involved really with their crucial expertise in every single step of the forum program. Cordial thanks also to the over 50 program coordinators from all the participating research committees, working groups, thematic groups, along with their presidents and board members. It was really their hard work, their dedicated passion, and their intellectual leadership that made our program possible. Over 600 session organizers are to be thanked for helping us to think across the entire spectrum of contemporary sociology. And thanks to all of you, to over 4,000 participants from 100 countries for having come here, for making this festival of ideas a reality, this festival of learning, this re-energizing of the sociological imagination, the re-energizing of the manifold struggles for a better future. Now enjoy your evening in Vienna and do spread the conversations we had around the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.